Some treasure is hidden because it is valuable. Some is hidden because it is dangerous. And every so often, in the deepest places of the world, there's a treasure hidden because someone could not bear to look at it anymore. That was the case with the treasure of Thalst the Healer. Earliest records place it somewhere beneath the western slopes of the Sword Mountains, though none agree on the exact location. One map calls the place Harthoon's Mouth. Another names it the Black Stair. A third, written by a trembling hand in the margin of a caravan ledger, calls it only the Sink. I've always trusted the third name the most. The story begins centuries after Thalst disappeared, with a salvage crew out of Neverwinter. 5 people entered the old ruin. That is important. Remember the number. 5. Their leader was Mara Vane, a former caravan guard who had survived 3 bandit ambushes, 2 failed expeditions, and 1 winter trap north of the Mere of Dead Men. She did not believe in luck. She believed in rope, dry tinder, sharp steel, and being the first to notice when a room had too many exits. With her came Pell, thief by trade and a locksmith when speaking to honest folk. Pell was smart and quick, cheerful in the way men become when they have spent years escaping consequences. There was Nessa Harrow, scholar of old scripts. She had a habit of reading inscriptions aloud before realizing whether she should. Garon Pike came as hired muscle. He had debts in Neverwinter and scars from places he preferred not to name. The last was Edrin Vallely, a barber surgeon with a steady hand. He knew how to stitch a wound, set a bone, and lie convincingly to frighten people about how much pain they were going to feel. Not one of them called themselves heroes. That may be why they lived as long as they did. They had come for a story told in taverns and old market stalls. A healer named Thalst had once belonged to an adventuring company known as the Dawnward Six. Their deeds had faded into rumor, but a few fragments remained. They'd driven ghouls from a monastery road. They'd broken a necromancer's hold over a valley east of Lylon. They had returned a stolen reliquary to a temple that later burned. Then, they entered Harthoon's Mouth in search of a buried tribute vault. 6 went in. 1 came out. Thalst. Witnesses said he returned with treasure enough to buy half a town. Gold, gemstones, relics, and worked silver from some older kingdom. But he did not spend it. He did not sell it. He paid for 5 empty graves, stood beside them until sunset, and vanished before dawn. After that, the treasure became a rumor with a warning tied to it. Mara's crew found the entrance after 3 days in a ravine, thick with roots and loose stone. There was no grand doorway, no carved faces, no curse written above the threshold. Just a narrow opening in a rock, breathing cold air into the afternoon. Pell crouched beside it and held up his lantern. "Dry inside," he said. Nessa leaned closer. "Dry means sealed." Pell smiled. sealed me's untouched. Adrian did not like the look of it. He said so once. No one mocked him, which was worse than if they had. They all felt it. Still, they entered. The first chambers were ordinary enough. Broken pottery, rusted hinges, root pushing through old mortar. The ruin had once been ceremonial, perhaps a shrine or burial house, before later hands cut it deeper into the mountain. Nessa noticed that. Someone expanded this place quickly, she said. Is that bad? Garon asked. In old ruins, quick work usually means fear or greed. And which one built this? Pell glanced. Nessa ran her fingers over the wall. Maybe both. Near dusk, they reached the black stair. Spiraled down through a shaft just wide enough for one person to descend at a time. At the bottom stood a bronze door, gone dark with age. Pell searched it and frowned. No lock. Mara lifted her lantern. Then open it. Like doors with locks, locks explain what a door wants. Nessa stepped closer. 6 names had been scratched across the bronze. Malin, Borin, Seila, Ithran, Yorick, Thalst. The Dawnward 6, she said. Below the names, another line had been cut into the metal. The letters were old, but readable. Nessa translated it slowly. No share was taken. No share was given. Let the living divide what the dead were owed. Pell stopped smiling. Garon pushed past him and placed one hand on the door. Sounds like treasure to me. The door opened at his touch. The chamber beyond was small and round. 6 stone chairs arranged around a central table. On the table rested a wooden chest banded in silver. The wood had not rotten. Silver had not tarnished. That was the first unmistakable sign of magic. Pell opened the chest carefully. No dart fired, no flame sprang, no poison mist curled from the hinges. Inside were 6 leather purses, each tied with a different cord. Red, green, blue, white, black, gold. Beside them rested a pale bone charm and a folded strip of vellum. Nessa took the vellum first. Her lips moved silently as she read. Then she said, "We should leave." Nobody moved. Mara took the vellum from her. Read it aloud. Nessa did. These are the shares of the Dawnward 6. Let none take what is not earned. Let none spend what is not mourned. Let none profit from a grave he would not enter. The room seemed colder after that. Pell looked at the chest. That is very clearly a curse. Garon lifted one of the purses. It was heavy. That is very clearly gold. Now this is the part of the story where people like to pretend they would have chosen differently. They would have closed the chest. They would have honored the warning. they'd have walked back up the black stair empty-handed and grateful. Perhaps. Mara did not order them to leave. That was all the permission they needed. They carried the chest out of the ruin, camped above the ravine. Mara insisted they count everything before returning to the road. That was her nature. She trusted numbers because numbers did not flatter, numbers did not panic. They opened the purses by firelight. Each held coins, a few small jewels, and one personal object. The red purse contained a narrow gold ring, the green, a broken pipe, the blue, a silver hair clasp, the white, a prayer bead, the black, a knife with its tip snapped off. The gold purse held coins and an empty glass vial stoppered with wax. Mara divided the treasure into 5 shares. Then Pell pointed at the cloth. You counted wrong. There were 6 piles. Mara stared at them. She had not miscounted coins since she was 16. She gathered the treasure and divided it again. 5 shares. They watched as several coins slid across the cloth by themselves, scraping together into a 6th pile. Nobody spoke. The fire crackled softly between them. Edrin was the first to say what they all understood. Put it back. Garon covered his pile with one hand. No. You saw that. I saw magic. Magic can be dealt with. Nessa was still looking at the purses. No. Not all magic. Mara made the decision. They would return to Neverwinter. Sell nothing. Spend nothing. And let Nessa study the curse, somewhere with walls, locks, and access to temple records. Sounded safe? Careful? It's also exactly how curses travel. That night, Edrin woke to the sound of crying. Pell lay asleep beside the dying fire, tears running down his face. His hands gripped his blanket as if trying to hold the door shut. Edrin leaned close. Pell whispered one word. Thalst. When Edrin shook him awake, Pell opened his eyes and screamed. It was not loud. It did not last long. It was the sound of a man waking with someone else's death still inside him. By morning, none of them mentioned it. They packed the treasure and started south. Below them, in the round chamber, beneath Harthoon's mouth, 6 stone chairs waited in the dark. One of them was no longer empty. The curse did not strike like a trap. That would have been merciful. It arrived as a memory. At first, the memories came in sleep. Pell dreamed of a narrow passage lit by blue fungus. He was running. His side hurt. His left hand was slick with blood. Someone behind him shouted a name. Not Pell. Sayla. He woke with that name in his mouth. And the certainty that he had once died within the sight of sunlight. Nessa dreamed of black iron, a door, sealed chamber, water rising around her waist. She had ink-stained hands in the dream, scholar's hands, mage's hands. They struck the door until the knuckles split. On the other side, Thalst shouted, "I will come back." The dream ended before the water reached her mouth. Garon dreamed of being trapped beneath fallen stone, not crushed enough to die quickly, not free enough to live. He could hear Thalst digging, he could hear the healer crying as he pulled at rocks that would not move. Garon woke with a face wet, teeth clenched hard enough to hurt. Mara claimed she had no dreams. For 2 nights, everyone believed her. On the 3rd, Idrin found her standing outside of camp before dawn, sword drawn facing north. Her eyes were open. Snow had soaked through her boots. "Mara," he said. She turned. For a moment, she looked at him as if she had never seen him before. She answered in a voice that was nearly hers. "Malin." After that, they tried to abandon the treasure. Mara ordered the purses buried beneath a dead pine, a mile from the road. They dug deep, covered the earth, marked the tree with 3 cuts so they could avoid it if they ever passed that way again. At sunset, Chess sat beside Garon's pack. He'd swore he'd not taken it. No one doubted him. Nessa spent that night studying the purses under lantern light. Each cord matched one of the names on the bronze door. Red for Malin, leader of the Dawnwood Six. Green for Borin, the dwarf. Blue for Selah, the scout. White for Yorick, the priest. Black for Ithran, the mage. Gold for Thalst, the healer. When Edrin touched the gold cord, he felt a pulse beneath his finger. Not a heartbeat. A knock. He pulled away. "Don't touch that one again," Nissa said. "Why?" "I don't know." That was the most honest answer she gave all night. By the time they reached Grey Mantle Ford, changes were harder to ignore. Pell began working with his left hand, though he'd always favored his right. His picks moved faster that way, he said. It was nothing. Garon started carving bits of wood into pipe stems, throwing them into the fire once he noticed what he was doing. Mara spoke less, watched more, reached for a sword before anyone else heard danger. Nessa wrote notes in a script she could not read while awake. Adrian heard voices and washing his hands, always from behind stone, always asking why he had left them. Curse was not possessing them. That would be too simple. It was making room Each dead member of the Dawnward Six had left something behind, and the treasure had carried it forward. Memory, regret, fear, the shape of a promise. And promises, when broken badly enough, do not always die with the person who made them. At the inn in Grey Meadow Ford, the curse showed itself to someone outside the group for the first time. The innkeeper's wife noticed the blue purse when Pell opened his pack. Her eyes lingered on the silver hair clasp inside it. It was delicate and worth much more than she would earn in a season. Pell saw her looking and closed the pack quickly. That should have been the end of it. Near midnight, he awoke to find her standing beside his bed. Her eyes were open, but unfocused. One hand reached towards the blue purse. Pell grabbed her wrist. The woman looked at him and spoke in Sayla's voice. "That one is mine." The room erupted. The innkeeper shouted. Garon drew steel. Mara forced everyone back before someone died out of panic. By dawn, the salvage crew had left. They paid with clean coin, not from the chest. The innkeeper threw it into the road after them. No one stopped to pick it up. 3 miles south of the inn, Mara halted the group. "We return it. That may be the clearest sign of how frightened they had become." They turned back towards Harthoon's mouth. The road north felt longer than it should have. The treasure grew heavier with every mile. Purses did not gain coin, at least not in any way that could be seen. But each person who carried one stooped under it, as if bearing wet stone. Memory sharpened. They learned how the Dawnward Six had died. Bourne had gone first. The passage collapsed after a tribute chest was moved. He held the falling stones long enough for the others to crawl clear. Thalst tried to reach him, but there was too much weight, not enough time. In Garon's memory, Bourne laughed once from beneath the rock. "Go on then." Itheron died behind the black iron door. The mage had spent his strongest spell saving the others earlier in the descent. When water began filling the chamber, he had nothing left that could break the seal. Nissa remembered the last thing he did. He stopped pounding on the door. Then he apologized to everyone who could not hear him. Yorick the priest died on the altar stair. He had exhausted every prayer, every blessing, keeping the others alive. When his legs failed, Thalst tried to lift him. Yorick placed one hand on the healer's wrist. Save who can still be saved. Memory came to Edrin while he was tending Garon's blistered heel. The needle slipped. Garon cursed. Edrin sat very still until the memory passed. Sayla died near the exit corridor. Pell remembered that one in pieces. Cold wall, broken blade, daylight somewhere ahead, and Thalst saying her name in a voice that already knew the answer. Maithen died last. Mara dreamed it on the final night before they reached the ravine. Maithen stood by the bronze door, wounded but upright, sword in one hand. Thalst had the chest. He did not want it. That was clear even in the dream. Maithen ordered him to take it. "Bring our shares home," she said. Thalst promised. That was the heart of it. Not treasure or death. A promise. Promise made to the dead is still a promise, even when no living court can enforce it. They reached the ravine under the low gray sky. The entrance waited exactly as before. Pell stood before it, shook his head. "I hate that it didn't change." Nessa looked past him into the dark. Places rarely do. People change enough for both. Mara lit the lantern. One by one they entered the ruin again. This time, no one joked about gold. Returning a cursed treasure should have been simple. Walk in, set it down, walk out. But simple things are rare underground. The first levels of Hawthorne's mouth seemed smaller on the return. Passages pressed closer. Sound traveled poorly. Even Garon, who normally complained about silence, kept his mouth shut. At the collapsed passage, he stopped. No one had told him where Borin died. He knew. The green purse hung from his belt. His hand shook as he untied it. "This is where he held it," Garon said. He placed the purse at the base of the fallen stone. For a moment, nothing happened. Then, the green cord loosened by itself. Coins inside darkened, flaked, collapsed into dust. Garon dropped to one knee. His breath came hard, but when he looked up, something had left his face. The black iron door waited below. Nessa stood before it for several minutes, one hand resting against the metal. There were no sounds of water behind it now. No voice. No movement. Only the memory of a man who had once waited there for help that never came. She set the black purse down. The cord opened. Ash scattered across the threshold. Ithran says he is sorry. Pell gave a weak laugh. For what? Nissa wiped her face and stepped back. For thinking he was too clever to die. No one knew what to do with that. At the stair, Adrian placed the white purse where Yorick had fallen. The prayer bead rolled out onto the stone, cracked once, cleanly, then turned into powder. Adrian felt warmth pass through the chamber. Lasted only a breath. Then it was gone. The blue purse was harder. Selah had died near the exit corridor, close enough to see daylight. Pell had known it since the first dream, and each step toward that place made him look younger and more frightened. "I can't," he said. Mara stood beside him. "You can." "No, you don't understand. I can feel it." He looked at her. For a moment, Mara's expression changed. Not fully, not possession, something quieter. A memory looking through her eyes. She made it farther than anyone thought she could, Mara said. Do not make her wait here because you are afraid. Pell knelt. His hand shook as he placed the blue purse on the stone. The silver hair clasp inside it caught the lantern light once. The purse emptied into dust. Pell covered his mouth and cried without sound. 4 shares returned. 2 remained. Red for Malin, gold for Thalst. They descended into the round chamber, found the bronze door standing open. 6 names still scratched across it. The table stood in the center. Chairs waited around it, but 1 chair had moved. The 6th had been slightly apart when they first found the chest. They all remembered that. Now it faced the table like the others. Mara placed the red purse in front of it. Nothing happened. She tried again. Still nothing. Garon looked around the chamber. Nissa studied the room. Names on the door. Malin did not die here. Pell's face fell. Of course she didn't. Mara picked up the red purse. She died farther in. There is no farther in, Garon said. Nissa pointed beyond the vault. There, almost hidden behind a broken pillar, is a narrow passage none of them had taken the first time. A cold draft moved through it. They entered single file. The passage led to a sloped chamber split by a deep crack in the floor. Across the gap stood another bronze doorway, half open. Beyond it, darkness. Above it, a thin line of pale daylight entered through some collapsed old stone, and this was where Thalst had escaped. This was where Malin had stayed behind. They found the marks of the final fight in the chamber. Boot scrapes, cuts in the wall, a broken blade wedged between stones near the gap. Mara knelt there. For once, she had no command to give. She placed the red purse beside the broken blade. The cord came loose. Treasure faded. Mara lowered her head, and when she rose, Malin was gone. 5 shares had been returned, and yet the chamber should have felt lighter. It did not. Edrin held the gold purse in both hands. The cord was tight, untouched, and warm. Garon stared at it. Where does his go? That question followed them back to the round chamber. Nissa read the inscription again. No share was taken. No share was given. Let the living divide, but the dead were owed. Pell sat in one of the stone chairs, and immediately stood as if burned. Maybe we leave this here. We tried leaving the treasure, Mara said. No, I mean properly, on the table, with the others. There are no others now. That's not comforting. Edrin stepped toward the 6th chair. The gold purse pulsed in his hand. He did not want to sit. He did anyway. The moment he touched the stone, the chamber changed.
Not visibly. Lanterns still burned. The others stood still nearby, but Edrin no longer heard them. He heard breathing, ragged and exhausted. Memory opened around him. Thalst sat in the same chair, with treasure divided before him. 5 shares for the dead, 1 for himself. His hands were torn from digging at stone. His robes were stiff with old blood. He had returned to the ruin, alone. That was the part the stories had always missed. He had paid for graves. He had tried to deliver the shares. He had stood before families who looked past the gold and saw only the person missing behind it. Then he had brought the treasure back. Not to hide, but to answer. In the memory, Thalst stared at the gold purse for a long time. His survivor's share. One he could not spend and could not destroy. On the table before him lay a journal, a bone charm and an empty glass vial. Edgar knew the vial at once. Thalst had carried healing drafts in it. The last it had been used on himself after Selah died near the exit. He had needed enough strength to move the chest and reach daylight. That act had saved his life. It had also ruined it. Edrin came back to himself with a sharp breath. The others were watching him. "What did you see?" Nessa asked. Edrin looked at the gold purse. The reason. The party found Thalst beneath the floor. Pell discovered the seam behind the 6th chair, nearly invisible, sealed with old mortar and dust. He opened it with a thief's patience and frightened man's care. Inside was a narrow compartment. It held a healer's satchel, a journal wrapped in oilcloth, and a bundle of bones and the remains of a gray cloak. All the stories said Thalst disappeared, and they were wrong. He had returned to the dungeon and died beside the treasure he could not forgive himself for carrying out. Nessa opened the journal. Early pages were careful, practical. List of supplies, wound treatments, names of herbs, notes on fractures, fevers, venom, infection. A healer's working book, or log, if you will. After Harthorn's mouth, the writing had changed. Became uneven, then desperate. Nessa read only portions aloud. "I give Malin's ring to her brother. He asked where her hand was. I gave Boren's pipe to his daughter. She said he had promised to teach her the song he smoked to. I gave Selah's clasp to her mother. She did not take it. She closed the door. I gave Yorick's bead to his temple. They thanked me for returning a holy object and never asked what his final words were. I could not find Ethram's family. Perhaps he had none. Perhaps that is another failure. I thought the treasure could be divided. I was wrong. A share is not coin. A share is what a life leaves unfinished. The final entry was written in a smaller hand. I healed wounds. I closed skin. I set bone. I stopped blood. I thought that meant I saved people. But I could not save them. And when I could not save them, I carried out the gold because Malin told me to. Because duty was easier to understand than grief. Let anyone who take this chest carry memory before wealth. Let them count the dead before they count the coin. Let the shares be returned, and let my own share wait until someone living understands why it was never mine. The chamber remained still after Nessa finished. That stillness was worse than noise. Garon broke it. So what does that mean? Edrin stood over Thalst's remains. It means he did not curse the treasure because he hated thieves, but because he hated himself. Pell rubbed his arms. That does not make me feel safer. It shouldn't, Nessa said. Mara looked at the gold purse in Edrin's hand. Can you finish it? Edrin almost laughed. He was a barber surgeon from Neverwinter with tired hands and a pack full of field dressings. He'd never broken a curse in his life. But he was also the only healer in the room, and curses, like wounds, sometimes choose the hand they want. He set the gold purse on the table. Nothing happened. He placed the empty vial beside it. Still nothing. He added the bone charm from the chest. The gold cord tightened. Edrin understood then. Not clearly, not in words, but enough. He opened Thalst's satchel. Inside were old bandages, ruined tools. He took the linen and wrapped Thalst's bones as carefully as he would have wrapped the patient's wound. Garon watched from the doorway. You're burying him? No. Edrin tied the linen. I'm treating him. Pell looks sick. He's bones. So were the others, by the time we found their shares. Edrin lifted the wrapped remains and placed them into the sixth chair. Then he sat across from them. The gold purse lay between healer and healer. For the first time since they had found the treasure, Edrin spoke directly to Thalst. You failed them. The air tightened. Lantern flames bent towards the table. Edrin continued. You lived when they died. You carried out what they earned and called it obedience, because that hurt less than calling it survival. Mara's hand moved towards her sword. Nessa shook her head. Edrin did not stop. But you came back. The room seemed to listen. You brought the treasure here. You left the warning. You made certain anyone who touched it would know their names before spending their shares. He looked at the gold purse. You did not want forgiveness. You wanted witness. That was the word. Not payment, not punishment. Witness. A healer can close a wound and still leave the pain unspoken. Thalst had learned that too late. His curse had been a crude and terrible thing, but beneath it was a need older than magic. He wanted someone to know what happened, not the songs, not the rumors, just the truth. Edrin untied the gold cord. This time it opened. Inside were no coins, only the empty vial. He placed the vial in Thalst's wrapped hands. The chamber went dark, not because the lanterns failed, because for a breath every shadow stood up. 6 figures appeared around the table. Faint. Incomplete. Malin stood with one hand resting on the back of her chair. Boren sat broad and steady beside her. Sayla leaned near the doorway, ready to run. Ithran watched the table as if calculating some impossible escape. York's face held no accusation. Thalst sat in the 6th chair. He looked younger than Edrin had expected. Not innocent, only tired. For a moment, no one moved. Then, Malin reached across the table and placed a hand over Thalst's. The gold purse collapsed to dust. Vision ended, and the treasure was gone. Only 6 faded cords remained on the table. Red, green, blue, white, black, gold. Pell sat down hard against the wall. Garon walked out of the chamber without speaking. Edrin remained seated across from the wrapped bones of Thalst the Healer. It was a long time before he stood. They buried Thalst outside the ravine, where daylight touched the stones in summer. No priest blessed the grave. Edrin spoke instead. The salvage crew returned to Neverwinter with empty packs. Only 6 old cords and a story most people had no reason to believe. Mara never led another expedition. Pell became a locksmith. Refused work involving vaults. Nessa wrote an account of the curse. No publisher bought it. Garon vanished into mercenary work and was later reported dead near the borderlands, though such reports were never reliable. As for Edrin Valeli, he returned to medicine for a while. That seemed to be the end of it. But of course, curses rarely end where people stop telling the story. The accepted version of the tale ends with the treasure gone. It's cleaner that way. Cursed hoard is found, dead are remembered, guilty are witnessed, living leave wiser than they entered. That's the version people prefer. But the last detail troubles me. 3 days after Edrin Valeli returned to Neverwinter, he found the bone charm in his coat pocket. He'd watched it vanish with the treasure they all had. Yet, there it was. Pale, smooth, and warm. Edrin should have thrown it into the sea. He should have buried it beneath Thalst's grave. He should have taken it to the temple and begged someone holier than himself to lock it away. Instead, he kept it for remembrance. That is what he wrote later, and perhaps he believed it. Years passed. Edrin grew older. His hands stiffened. His patients changed from caravan guards and dock workers to children of people he had once treated in their youth. He did not speak of Harthorn's mouth. Cursed treasure, a dead company, a healer who came back. Those who knew him said he became gentler after the expedition, slower to promise recovery, quicker to sit beside the dying when nothing more can be done. That may have been wisdom, or that may have been fear of repeating Thalst's mistake. Near the end of his life, Edrin rented a small room near the docks of Neverwinter. Landlord found him dead one morning after he failed to answer the door. There's no sign of violence, no hidden chest, only a table, 6 chairs, and the bone charm placed carefully in the center. City records mention the detail once, then never again. Among Edrin's belongings was a short letter addressed to no one. It read, "I thought keeping it meant remembering them. That was my mistake. Memory is not ownership." Beneath the letter lay 6 chords. Red, green, blue, white, black, gold. The gold one looked newer than the rest. After that, the charm vanished. There are later accounts, but none can be proven. A priest in Leyland claimed a dying adventurer pressed a pale charm into his hand and begged him not to heal the next wound too quickly. Merchant in Daggerford sold a bundle of old dungeon relics and spent the next month dreaming in other people's voices. Band of treasure hunters near the Sword Mountains abandoned a dig after finding a round chamber with 6 stone chairs and a sentence carved into the table. No shares clean until the dead are counted. Perhaps those stories are inventions. People enjoy attaching new shadows to old curses. But I have always found the tale of Thalst difficult to dismiss. Not because of the magic. What troubles me is the guilt. It guarded the memory of those who had paid for it. And that is the danger of taking things from the dead. You may think you are carrying away gold, you may think you are carrying away relics, jewels, or old coins no one living has claimed, but sometimes, without knowing it, you are carrying away the last piece of life that never finished speaking. So if you ever find a chest in a sealed room, and beside it rests some small keepsake too personal to sell, leave it. Do not count the coins first. Count the chairs. Count the names. Count the dead. And if there is one share more than there ought to be, Walk away before it learns yours.